Hello and welcome back to the 2017 Disruptive Innovation Festival. My name's Joe. I'm the editor-in-chief of Circulate and part of the Diff hosting team here at Diff HQ. And I am delighted to be hosting this session, this open session on the future of design, one of our three key themes here at the Diff this year. And this time we're going to be looking at food packaging. And something I love as we explore the future of design, especially in relation to the circular economy, is when people use their creativity to redesign everyday things. And what better subject matter than food packaging? It's sometimes seen as an evil. There's too much of it. It clogs up our bins. It gets in the ocean in nasty places like that. But it's good for some things. It keeps our food safe and fresh. Fresher for longer. It can be used in all sorts of weird and wonderful ways. So food and packaging is hugely important. And thankfully, there are some people out there who are working hard to redesign it as we speak. And we're joined by three of them today. I'm pretty excited about this one. Three people at the cutting edge of rethinking food packaging. Today, we've got with us for this open session, Rodrigo Gonzalez, who's using new manufacturing techniques with OHO. We've got Michele Barone using new materials with PA Consulting, and leading through this next session, Safia Qureshi, who is joining us from Web Summit in Lisbon and is speaking on behalf of Cup Club. Safia, I'm going to hand over to you because you're taking the reins for this session. We get to sit back and just enjoy hearing you talk through these amazing innovations. But we'll be checking in a bit later and take it away.
Amazing. Thank you, Joe. Well, first of all, welcome everybody to Web Summit Lisbon. I'm in a box right now in the quietest corner I could find. But we're very proud to bring to you some really interesting discussions about the circular economy, about new materials in the circular economy around food. So a very good friend of mine, Rodrigo, also both winners of the New Plastics Innovation Prize Award from the EMF, and Michele, who's at PA Consulting. I'd like to do a quick intro for everybody because I'm sure everyone's got some brilliant things to talk about regarding what they're working on. But basically, all three products that we're going to focus on is on a small scale, what OHO is doing, what PA Consulting is doing, and on a more large scale, what Cup Club is doing. So, Rodrigo, please tell us a little bit about your background and OHO. I'd love you to give a little bit of an intro, and then we're going to deep dive into the presentation.
Great. So, hello everyone. My name is Rodrigo Garcia. I'm based in London, but I'm from Spain, and I co-founded with Pierre Pasquier a startup called Skipping Rocks Lab in 2014. That we are trying with the goal of making packaging disappear. And our first product is called OHO, and it's an edible membrane that will contain liquids.
Amazing.
I'm here today in the office of PA. We have a wonderful sunset behind us of London, Victoria.
It's my turn. Hello, everyone. Michele Barone. I work for PA Consulting, and I'm focused in consumer products, and specifically in developing new manufacturing and packaging solutions. And today, I would like to talk about a very exciting project we worked on, which is this. It's the bamboo container, and is a beverage container entirely made from natural materials.
Brilliant. Okay, so, and I'm Safia Qureshi, founder and CEO of Cup Club. We are in the intersection of the circular economy, design, and tech to essentially track all food packaging within a closed environment for food systems. So I'm going to first start with Rodrigo going through OHO. So we're going to be sharing with you a presentation, which I hope you'll all enjoy. We're going to be deep diving today. So we've got about 40 minutes on this session. It'll be wonderful to get details onto these three particular areas that we're very passionate about, which is CE, design, and tech. As mentioned, you know who we are. And I'm going to start with OHO. So tell me a little bit further, Rodrigo, about the journey of OHO and how it started. You know, how did you start the entire process, or how did the idea come about? Were you sort of just sitting around somewhere? Was it an extension of a research project you were on? We'd love to hear more.
Great, perfect. So yes, we were students, Pierre Paslier and Guillaume, who started this project. We were students in the Royal College of Art and Imperial College of London in a Master Cal Innovation Design Engineering, and we were working around different areas. One of them, it was a bigger project of an artificial cloud. So we were working around making water desalinate through the energy of the sun, and with that vapor that gets evaporated, being able to generate buoyancy and being able to float with that water and deliver that water inland. When we were focusing on how to deliver that water, we wanted to avoid plastics, and we started that kind of like a little research parallel project around how we could contain water without using any kind of like plastic container, trying different kind of hydrogels, tapioca seeds, natural materials, etc. And that was kind of like the beginning of Ojo. We found a technique that had been used since 1940s to make mostly flake caviar that is based on alginate. It's a extract from a brown seaweed, and this technique had been used widely on the culinary industry since then. What we try to propose is try to kind of like use this technique for packaging applications that we think is a novel use of it. So since then we have been working on different lines to try to optimize these membranes for packaging applications.
And so how did you first go about, of course you thought about membranes and you looked at examples in the industry where it was being applied, so specifically, and also natural materials. How did you go about making your first one, and what did that look like? Did it sort of resemble?
Yeah, so we started in a kitchen. Yeah. None of us have a chemical background. My background was in architecture, and then I switched a bit towards design and a bit of business. And we started in a kitchen doing really rough prototypes. Probably the first prototypes, they were not looking that good, but they were looking, so that was the important part. And we were able to kind of like handle these to friends and family at the beginning, and then to random consumers that we found on the street. So we were lucky that like since almost day one of this project, we were able to have testing ongoing with different people and get different reactions, and that really helped us to shape the product. We did as well an interesting move that was to license the first recipe of this product as Creative Commons. So we put a video online that got several million views over the different kind of like countries in the world, where we show the people how to make one of these water blobs, let's call it like that. And a lot of people start to replicate this recipe and start to kind of like engage with it. So all over the world, we had a kind of like people from Japan, people from America, people from Africa replicating this and showing to the world kind of like which kind of other ways were to make this recipe. So that kind of like in a way validate for us a bit the proposition. And at the same time, it gave us a lot of insights, not only technically, but as well in terms of consumer feedback on how this was going to do. So, for example, the slide that you are seeing at this point is a multi-package. That was one of the main kind of like points that the consumers raised, that it was really hard to close because it's a membrane. Membranes doesn't close. So if you think on nature is made out of membranes, and once you open an orange, you cannot close it back. But what we try to do is try to simulate the same kind of behavior for like fruits, for example, how they work. If you have several membranes around it, you can consume it in different points. So if you think on an orange, you have a protective layer that you don't need, is more resistant than the inside segments that they are inside of an orange, that they are sieve-sized containers. So that's kind of like what you see in the picture. That's a multi-package. The orange peel is a peel that you can discard and biodegrades and compose really quickly, and a small sieve-sized container, they have a thinner, clear membrane that you can consume if you want.
And this is a hilarious question. How many of these bubbles do you think you've made, Rodrigo?
How many we have made? So we have made so far we are kind of like constantly increasing the production. So that's had been, myself, I had been doing probably in the range of thousands. As a company, probably I don't have the current number, but probably in the 10,000s of units. We currently do several kind of like sport events, marathons with different events organizers, and we do quite a lot of events and music festivals where we distribute them. Currently, we are working in how to industrialize this process a bit more, because at the moment it's a bit of a semi-manual process, so it involves quite a lot of human labor. And the idea is that we are going to have a machine ready for next summer, and this machine is going to be located really close to the place of consumption. So we are working in a similar machine of what you can think of a coffee machine, for example, that as a first instance, it could be placed on retail or in any specific context that you will like to consume this kind of packaging and the content inside. And the idea is that it could be made fresh in the same morning and could be consumed during the day.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the picture that you're seeing at the moment is the technical team. We have been working really closely with Imperial College, where we were students. So we have been running several projects with them, with different teams of students. Every year we run a project with the undergraduate team that we have 180 students working on different properties of the membrane for a couple of months. That's quite exciting. And then what you see in the picture is the follow-up team that we get for the summer, looking a bit deeper into different properties of the membrane. So those have been the three main pillars that we have been developing the solution. One is chemistry, the other is industrialization that we have been doing the last stages in collaboration with PA, and the other one is testing with consumers and in different contexts to see how the product behaves.
Amazing. And so out of your experience, what was the sort of biggest roadblocker? Because I'm a founder as well, and anyone who is on a journey will have a moment or many moments when you are faced with a major problem or a major constraint, and you have to somehow think outside the box and develop a new way of coming at it. So what would you suggest, or what would you describe as a major pitfall or as a roadblocker in the journey of bringing OHO out into consumers? Like, what was the biggest challenge for you, or a few, if you could describe them? That would be really interesting.
So I suppose kind of like every day we face a lot of challenges, so it's not an easy way to kind of like open a new way of doing things, especially with a product that it's quite different in terms of like how it looks, how you use it, as well the distribution kind of like of it, the logistic of it, the way of interacting. So there's quite a lot of challenge. Just to name a few, for example, at the beginning we were kind of like focusing a bit our business strategy into packaged beverage for other big companies, and we engaged quite a lot on these kind of like relationship or conversations with big players in the industry of beverage. At the end, kind of like after quite a time spent on those relationships and making prototypes and proposals, some of them they went through, some of them they were not interested for us, because the way that this relationship was going, we could not hold kind of like any kind of value for the future as a company. They just were treating us mostly as a consultant.
Got it.
We don't want to
be
doing. That was a good lesson for us to understand that we probably wanted to push it ourselves in our own terms and our own conditions, and probably with our own content. And that's why we raised a bit of money to do that, and we have a kind of like a plan A that we are executing, and that's only depending on us. And on the side we are collaborating with some companies, some of them big, some of them small, but like that's not a key roadblock like that anymore. It just depends on us. So that has been a good lesson for us.
Amazing. And so tell us about what you're developing now. So you'd mentioned briefly about the machines. What are your thoughts on how you'd like to distribute? What are the sort of dreams and aspirations of how you want to get this out from a point of source product to people?
Perfect. So if we focus specifically in oils containing water, 1/3 of the CO2 consumption of the consumption of water in bottles comes from the packaging itself, but like 1/3 it comes as well for the transportation of these bottles, because you normally, sometimes you don't realize that like you are finishing drinking water from Fiji or from Evian or from really far away, and it's just water, so it's H2O, so it's like it's nothing too special, and just most of the consumers, they just want to hydrate themselves, and we have really good kind of like tap water in most of the, at least in most of the UK. That's where we want to start it. So that's sort of like this proposition is about packaging filtered tap water. So the idea is that you don't have to transport the water. You just kind of like package on the spot the water that is available through the through the tap. And the idea.
And it would be a plug and play.
Yeah, it will be a kind of like a plug and play, quite similar if you think on the model of an espresso machine, for example, where we will supply the materials to make this package, and then in a first stage, the operator will make it for you. If you go to any specific kind of like retailer to buy your food, for example, on the go, and you want one of these containers, you can buy it on the spot, and you know that they are made fresh, and that's it. Later on, we have the vision to expand to other kind of like format of machines, like a self-bending machine, or things a bit more focused on offices or another kind of environment, but that probably is just coming later.
Amazing. And so next chapter, we briefly talked about this just before we went live. Tell us about what's happening around the corner and what you're really excited about with Delta, because that's a new sort of chapter for you.
Yeah, exactly. So inside of the company that we have, Skipping Rocks Lab, we aim to have a portfolio of different products to solve different kind of challenges around packaging. And one of the products that we know have some kind of like limitations and some challenges that is mostly focused around beverage. But we are working on other solutions. Some of them focus around plastic bags, some of them focus around salad trays, some of them focus around coffee cups. And we are quite kind of like looking to see what's the next challenge. We're quite good at starting ideas. Maybe we're not that good at closing them. But yeah, one of the challenges that we put ourselves during the summer was looking at this competition that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation launched. It was focused around low volume sachets, mostly for sauces, shampoos, or other kind of like low volume applications. So that's why we kind of like started working on this, and we evolved the idea of what we had for Delta. That is what you saw on this image. So basically, it's an evolution and based on the same kind of like concept of local manufacturing, where a hotel, in this case, for example, if it's a shampoo sachet, could have on site a machine where they could kind of like transport in bulk whatever gel or shampoo or cream you need, and package on the spot, saving quite a lot of like distribution cost. Small sachets that they can distribute around the different rooms, and then you can use it. And it's not a plastic sachet; it's a natural material sachet. It's quite similar to the membrane that we developed for water, but like it's a bit tweaked because you have to always adjust to different pH, different densities of the material, etc. And you can have it. Another kind of like iteration of this was around sauces and ketchup and mayonnaise and other kind of sauces that you can use in restaurants, in canteens, etc. And another iteration of Delta was, or it is, around sport gels. So thanks to the price of the application. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And so do you see a sort of a variety of different types of describing things beyond food? So are you basically looking at adjusting the chemical composition of the seaweed packaging to suit whatever content that you're carrying? So are you saying that we're moving away from typically just looking at food, but also looking at other types of liquids?
Exactly. I think what we want to give kind of like a platform or empower people or companies that at the moment they don't have the power to package things themselves, because plastic industry is a private industry and belongs mostly to the big players. So in this kind of like I think with this kind of proposition, hopefully soon, we will encourage kind of like quite a lot of small and medium industries to package their own products. And this doesn't need to be around beverage, and it could be, you can package juices if you have a small juice shop, but as well, you can package cosmetics, you can package spirits. We are talking about with different confectionery companies, even medicaments, etc. So I think kind of like, yeah, my scrutiny is the packaging itself, not the content.
Fab. Okay. Rodrigo, thank you so much. That was incredibly amazing. And for anybody listening, we do have a Q&A session at the end. So if you feel like all of this is ending too soon, please feel free to bring in your questions. And if you would like to have any further details or understand a little bit further about what OHO are up to, please visit www.skippingrockslab.com. We're now going to move on from PA Consulting, who you very briefly all met in the early stages. And Michele is going to talk about his bamboo beverage containers, which all sound fabulous and very innovative in the way that you have actually combined the textures and the composition of the materials.
Yes, indeed.
So Michele, I'd love to hear more about, I think there's probably some confidentiality around the actual client itself, but coating details, I'd love you to sort of explain how it all started. Did they come to you with a brief? Did you go to market and think of bamboo? Did you find a use case about bamboo? How did the bamboo journey start for you?
Yeah, sure. So it all started with, of course, our client coming to us and asking us to develop a sustainable beverage packaging or container made entirely from natural materials. And that means three things. So we couldn't use any materials coming from non-renewable resources like fossil fuels. We couldn't use any material which are not breaking down in the composting process like plastics. And finally, as a result of that, the material should be biodegradable. On top of that, the new container should meet or even exceed the performance of a standard plastic container. What does it mean? So on the supply chain point of view, the material should withstand the same level of forces and impacts as a normal plastic container, like a plastic bottle, for example. And in terms of consumer experience, that's actually the most difficult thing, because consumers, of course, in the consumer product space, are at the center of everything. And consumers, we consumers, are getting more and more demanding. Even if we want to try new sustainable packaging, we, I think, always expect some level of consumer experience to be met in terms of surface to be smooth, catchy graphics, smooth mouth cotton points, and of course the liquid inside shouldn't be affected by the packaging in terms of changing color or flavor. So that's actually the most difficult part in terms of requirements. So that's how we started, with the requirements, with our client coming to us asking for this breakthrough packaging.
And how did the bamboo sort of come about? Because there's many, of course, different alternatives to plastics which are very current in the market, so rice-based or cellulose-based. And out of those, how did you create hierarchy, and how did you sort of decide, okay, we're going to run with bamboo?
Yeah, sure. So the bamboo came later. It wasn't a requirement, it was a solution. Basically, to start, we started looking at the materials, the natural materials we could use. And we used three different sources. We used literature review, so coming from existing research in universities, also contacts with material suppliers and material developers, and we came up with a map of potential materials we could use, including three areas. So extracted directly from biomass like proteins and resins, also bioplastics, we looked at that, and minerals. But looking at this map, we came to the conclusion that no one material could meet all the requirements, because we needed a combination of flexibility and stiffness to survive, of course, to the supply chain and forces and impacts, but also they needed to have the right barrier properties to make sure that the product was preserved in the container.
Exactly.
So, as a
Which is the biggest
conclusion,
challenge.
yeah, so there was an initial challenge. So we came to the conclusion we had to develop a composite material made of natural materials, a new one that wasn't available. And to do that, we combined three things. We combined a structural material that was made of bamboo and soy fibers, hence the name bamboo container. In combination with a binder, which is like a glue, connecting the fibers together, and a coating material, which is building the barrier properties inside and outside the container. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, I'm not going to be able to share the materials, the names of the materials, but I mean, I'm going to be able to share some of the details, of course, but not everything.
So tell me about how you went about developing it, because there's quite a rigorous exercise for developing any sort of beverage container, especially when it's trying to replace plastics, as you already quite rightly pointed out. Plastics does do a lot of things with one material. So take us through some of the processes that you developed to get a product out that could compete, which is very admirable, by the way, and a very tough brief, I can imagine. So talk us through how you tested it.
Sure. So first of all, we started building some prototypes. So to build the prototypes, we developed a prototyping process that is not the same as the manufacturing process, but helped us understand how to manufacture the packaging, the container. We built some fixtures, we call them mandrels, that are effectively, it's basically a 3D, what was made by 3D printing, was a shape we could use as reference to start building layer by layer our bamboo container. So layers were built by combining a wet binder with a dry structural material until we were reaching a thickness of about 0.8 millimeters. We then extracted the container from the mandrel. Actually, we were using two mandrels for two halves of the container, and then we combined them together in an assembly process. And finally, we were applying a coating. So we were building prototypes this way, and once we had the prototypes, we could test them, as you mentioned. The test was divided in three areas. One is biodegradability, the other one is understanding the barrier properties, and finally, simulating the supply chain.
Okay.
So regarding the biodegradability, we buried the container in a combination of soil and compost, and we observed how the material was breaking down. After 4 months, we could observe that the material was actually breaking down, but the process was relatively slow. So after 4 months, it wasn't completely broken down, and the biodegradation was happening, but was happening at a slow rate. So we couldn't actually predict how long it was going to take to complete the process.
And what was the biodegradation method that you used? Was this in a commercial biodegrading facility? Was this in your back garden? Or did you do tests for both?
It was just done using basically commercial garden soil and compost combination that we could buy. And we did it in a soil in our own facility. We didn't do it in an external facility.
Okay, okay.
So the next is about barrier properties, and we divide it in two parts. One is liquid retention, which is basically see how long we see no leakages by, of course, storing water in the coated container. And after 50 days, which was the length of the test, we couldn't observe any leakage, which is positive. And regarding the vapor transmission, which was the other test we did for barrier properties, we saw a 1% vapor transmission rate extrapolated across 1 year, which is very low, very good, compared to a standard of 15%. So very good barrier property just using natural materials, which was great. Okay.
And finally, what was the composite? Sorry, I'll let you finish.
I was going to go to the next step. Yeah, please.
Yeah. The composite material. So you sort of explained the three stages, and Could you detail out what the composite was? Was that something that was also biodegradable? Was that natural cellulose based? Was that another? How did you source that? And how did you know its compatibility with the bamboo?
Well, first of all, this is all based on a lot of, let's say, desk research, because we have an expert in material. They understand the high-level compatibility of the material. Unfortunately, I won't be able to share, due to confidentiality reasons, the details of the materials we actually used, apart from the soy and bamboo fibers for the structural material.
Okay.
But the binder was like a glue, let's say, made of natural material, putting it all together. And the coating is a separate material that was applied later, and is another natural material. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share which material it is. So the fiber and the glue, let's say, were building the core of the container, actually.
Okay.
Of the
And then you were going to explain about the third stage. Yeah. Amazing. Final stage, which was the optimization for logistics and handling.
Yes, that's we simulated the supply chain forces, and that's a quite harsh test, actually. So what we did, we filled our container with water, and we also took a standard plastic container and filled it with water as well. And we did two types of tests. One is impact, and the other one is load. These are, of course, two different type of, let's say, stresses that the container can have, and they're quite different. So regarding the impact, we actually did a drop test, and the result was positive. So we saw that the bamboo container was showing some minor damages, was absorbing quite a lot of energy because it is not extremely flexible. That gave us an opportunity to understand that we could make the coating material more flexible to reduce the risk of damage of the coating or the barrier properties during impact. In the meantime, at the impact, the plastic container had a major deformation. Due to this flexibility, was actually not absorbing a lot of energy, the same as the bamboo container. The second test was the load test, where we compress to failure. Is a usual packaging test we do, and we observe what's the force for the resulting from that. And the result was very similar to the plastic container. Actually, the specification, the requirement was 24 kilos, and we achieved more than 100 kilos, which was really good. And this is also considering a safety factor of 6, which is very conservative in a way. So very positive test results in a way. So summarizing, we had a container made of natural materials, biodegradable. This one is a slow rate, but it was biodegradable, and meeting the same performance, if not exceeding the performance of a plastic container, which was impressive.
And so the main challenge for the manufacturing and taking this to market, what happened in the sort of final stages of the development for the bamboo water container?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, we had challenges, especially the new transformational projects usually have major challenges.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
And
so
was it around scaling? Was it around, and did you find the client was sort of, was there an opportunity to break through that? And this is similar to what I was asking Rodrigo earlier, as in what were your roadblocks and what did you find were the biggest challenges?
Yeah, so let me go through that. So the first challenge, to be honest, was about cost. So the actual bamboo container is about twice as expensive compared to the plastic container, but there's a way around that, because a container that is kind of celebrating the sustainability element could actually be associated with a that could basically be more in a more premium space, if you want. So that's one smaller challenge, if you want. The biggest challenge was, as you mentioned, around manufacturing, which was the next level of the development. So these containers cannot be produced, unfortunately, with blow molding machines, which is the way the plastic container is currently produced. And you can see an example of a tooling in the picture. So that means that it needed a new manufacturing process. And the new manufacturing process means three things. It means development risk, means time, and means investment. And these are three very bad things, unfortunately, for a lot of companies. So regarding the development risk, we're talking about companies who are basically focused and specialized in blow molding. And understanding the risk, the development risk of producing a packaging is completely different. I mean, it requires a big leap, taking a big risk. So the complexity, the development complexity, actually sometimes overestimated when you don't know about the new material and about the new format. So this is one element. The second element is time. There's a lot of focus on short term, as you may know, and then especially in the larger enterprises. And thinking about a longer term development sometimes is a challenge to commit to something like that. And then finally is the investment. So especially in the current landscape where there's a lot of consolidation, mergers and acquisition, and activist investors, there's a lot of tendency to reduce cost. So investing in new capital for a transformation new product becomes even more difficult. So this is actually a challenge that is not just true for this circular economy food packaging example. It's true more broadly for transformational new products and packaging that we encounter many, many times.
And did you sort of see the client or this opportunity particularly, was this sort of seen more as an R&D project, or was it from the beginning seen as something that they would want to scale? Because you would approach the project in a very different manner if it did have scalability opportunities from the beginning. So was this a client that was just trying to sort of explore into new materiality around
yes, that's a good question. I think it's a mix of the two. So I think each project always starts with a business case. So there's always a view to understand what would be the final payoff. But there's an element of that related to experimentation, which is in a way admirable, like checking, let's try this. We're not necessarily going to implement it. Let's try it, see what happens. So there's both elements actually. But the development is not finished. So just to expand a bit on the manufacturing element, we are working on this project, but more broadly in all the circular economy transformational packaging project. We always try to change and shape the development in a way that we can reuse as much as possible the existing manufacturing equipment, which is not easy. It's actually kind of constraining the type of things you can do. Therefore, we are trying to upgrade existing manufacturing system or just change the material and use existing manufacturing system. And that's not easy, and that's still ongoing. But in general, I would say that by constraining the type of manufacturing system you use, you actually miss an opportunity. So there's a lot of missed opportunity regarding transformation on new products out there. So being more bold and taking more risks in the consumer product sector and beyond, and especially for circular economy projects, companies can, of course, support the development of circular economy and make it reach its tipping point, but also at the same time find the huge growth opportunities as well, because sustainable packaging, like the one we talked about, translates very often in large growth opportunities. So basically, bold.
Absolutely, and I suppose, I mean, the biggest way of doing that is incremental. So as opposed to trying to do too much too soon, you sort of incrementally change the system or incrementally change the manufacturing capabilities and incrementally change the material composition, as opposed to try and change everything in tandem, which is often very expensive, very difficult to do, and can sort of somehow seem as a very daunting task. So brilliant. Thank you so much, Michele. That was fantastic. And for our audience, if you have any questions, please do drop them in, because we will be answering them very shortly. And if you have any other further details that you'd like to find out about the bamboo containers, please contact michele.barone@paconsulting.com. So just to quickly give you a little bit of an idea on what Cup Club are doing, as we'd love to sort of share the story of small, medium, large formats. And we've just concluded our small and medium. the large scale for Cup Club is to look at how can digitally we transform our food systems and our takeaway to make it not throwaway. And how we do that is we've been developing up and really interested at looking at the intersection of design, tech, and the CE to create closed systems for takeaway food packaging, making it possible for consumers to take away products such as coffee cups and lids and then return them to drop points for those points to then be serviced by us and the product to remain within the cycle. So essentially extending the life cycle or the life of products and creating more value of your everyday products. So I thought I would just sort of conclude in sharing with you all with what that would look like at city scale through a really simple animation. We use RFID technology, which is a way for us to let the product out into a consumer's hands. And then we very carefully manage the drop points across at city scale, allowing consumers to drop off their packaging for it to then be collected and recognized back into the system, and then redeployed in a non-combusting, zero carbon way back to retail. So that's essentially Cup Club. And we're starting with the coffee industry because coffee is the second largest commodity that's traded, and everybody loves coffee, and it's not going anywhere. We're going to be handing over back to our wonderful friends at DIF, which is Joe, for your Q&A. So please do send them in because we love hearing from you all. And you can see me back in my my box. I haven't gone anywhere. And now the sun is set from your side, so I'm looking at blue skies.
The sun has set on London, but not quite on this session yet. Thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing your individual projects and stories, and in quite some detail, different challenges, technical or kind of cultural, different aspects to the challenges you faced is always really useful for our audience. We have had a few questions in. So I will get started. Okay, so I guess this goes back to some of the technical side of things. We've had a question here that says, could we make all of this packaging out of seaweed or bamboo, or wouldn't that just shift, cause more problems elsewhere? So if we made all the bottles out of bamboo, then we'd maybe have an agricultural problem with trying to grow so much to keep up with the demand. Is that a possibility, or is that not something that we need to take into account?
Yeah, it is a possibility. I think it's something we have to take into account. In our specific project, we didn't consider this as changing the containers everywhere. We just thought about changing a small amount of container. But I agree, if we change everything, then we may have another problem somewhere else. We need to make sure that the supply of the material is adequate. When we selected the materials, actually, we made sure that the materials were available quite easily in large volumes. But we didn't consider, of course, the world being supplied with this level of packaging and materials and composite material. And the seaweed is a bit different.
Well, seaweed is a quite renewable resource. It's one of the fastest organisms in the planet. Some of the seaweeds grows up to 2 meters per day. So imagine something growing that fast. Doesn't use farmland. You don't need to water it. Doesn't need nutrients. It's a resource. It's like saying, yeah, plants from the sea. So it's a resource that, like, of course, you have to manage in a conscious way. It could be really, really, I think, renewable. At the same time, coming back to the original question, I don't know, even for the specific product that we are working on for Ojo, if we see being applied in every specific occasion that a plastic bottle is handled. I think at the moment we're focusing in low volume, in short consumption. We are quite kind of like advocates and quite really believers in the reusable bottles as well. Or reusable kind of like cups, etc. So we think there is a kind of like a solution for any specific context. So probably I won't be kind of like defending that we will replace every single plastic bottle in this world by a seaweed packaging.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that actually to that question, it's interesting because there are many use cases for different kinds of materials, and I think we need to value where each one of them belongs. So some products are best in small amounts, are probably well suited for certain kinds of packaging. Doing things by the gallons or by very large format, you need a different kind of material, you have different resistance, you have different pressures that the liquid load will have on the packaging. So you can't say that there will be, you know, a use case, that every use case will be perfect for one kind of material. An ecology of different materials, and we sort of, that's why we have material scientists out there looking at different kinds of solutions for different types of use cases. So I would say, you know, there's a right material for everything. Plastics doesn't have to be the material for everything. I think that's the main gist of what we're talking about is new definitions, new materials in the food packaging sector and thinking outside and beyond plastics. And when I say plastics, I don't just mean petrochemical plastics or oil-based plastics. I'm also talking about cellulose-based plastics. I'm talking about plant-based plastics, which over the last 5 years have had a huge development, but they're still about 4 times more expensive than regular plastics. So until commercial scale, it's very difficult for businesses to make that switch. Similar to how the solar market has grown over the last 5 years. Now solar is much cheaper than coal. And so when you're procuring for energy, everyone's now moving towards the solar market. And it makes sense because it's gone through that peak of mass market. So we're all transitioning and we're still going to see the transition, but I don't think it's one material fits all. I don't think that's the solution yet. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that does. I'm sure our audience will let us know if they're unsatisfied with that answer. But we have some more questions I want to get through. So this one, there have been lots of good innovations over the years. Is the rest of the packaging world ready for your ideas? How do you avoid these designs being too ahead of their time?
Who wants to start? Let's start with Rodrigo. You start, because we talked about that briefly in the talk. And moving customers and pushing customers and making people see the future.
I think like it's a matter of like finding a solution that is better in terms of like performance of what plastic is offering. And at the moment, plastic is offering a luxury. So you're getting a kind of like really, really nice product that you are going to use for less than 5 minutes and you are going to discard. So I think in the first place, most of the plastic bottles that we consume should not exist. And then how you can kind of like propose an alternative for that that is adequate to the consumption habits that we have been exposed by different companies that they're making a lot of money with these packagings and with these contents. I think that's a question that is raised. I suppose kind of like each of us are trying to kind of like push a bit with our solutions towards kind of like an alternative.
Yeah. Just adding some comments to what Rodrigo is saying. So maybe the question is not is the packaging world ready only, is the consumer ready as well? So because maybe the right solution will require the consumer to behave slightly differently. It could be by selecting the right packaging, or it could be by consuming differently. Like for example, the HoHo example will require you to handle the product, the liquid, in a different way, to consume it in a different way. So I think a part of the question regarding the packaging world is the consumer ready? And I think the consumer maybe is not ready. It will need a slow adaptation. And the E, to me, is at the center of all the packaging world and is the key for the change. It's us.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it goes back to the incremental conversation that we were having. So I don't know if you all remember being, I'm a Londoner, I grew up in London, and I remember the moment when we had supermarkets that were selling everything. There was this almost an overnight switch from first having milk delivered to your front door to then actually going to the supermarket and buying milk in this new plastic container, which no one had seen before in their lives. And that was kind of incremental because we were already going to the supermarket to buy other types of food that they thought, well, why don't we just distribute milk in that way? And that the milk industry just exploded from that moment onwards because the volume of milk that was being sold to everybody was much higher. So it's about incrementally allowing the consumers to take the journey with you, as opposed to just giving them a shock horror. This is a future, you must buy into it, but actually making it almost seamless. And I think there are many ways to do that. And I think, you know, there's definitely some understanding of how consumer behavior works around your product, about how people might react to your product, and testing it and letting them drive the actual product innovation so that you have the maximum amount of adoption possible.
I wonder as well, outside of the actual customer or the user of the product, I heard once about this, that some sort of bioplastic for a plastic bottle, if it sounds like a nice idea, but if it enters a PET recycling stream, it's actually can do more harm than good, because then you've got different types of plastic mixed up. Is that? I'm wondering, perhaps the bamboo bottle or container is the best example of this, but is there a whole other kind of infrastructure that needs to be set up to handle this different type of material? So the material alone is good, but what about all the infrastructure you might need to make sure it's properly used?
Well, yeah, you would need, well, as this is biodegradable, you would need infrastructure to manage the composting of this. And as far as I'm aware, this is not widely, available for a massive amount of containers. So we need to build a different material flow based on this. Yes, and yeah, I don't think we're ready yet, and because there's no critical mass.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple more questions and just want to get through. Okay, this one's specifically for Rodrigo. Have you got any advice for people that have a good idea for circular economy? They haven't specified whether it's packaging or anything else, but are low on resources or cash. There's lots of talk of kind of retooling, and we heard that from Michele. But it sounds pretty expensive. How can people actually get started?
Well, I think you just get started, and I don't think kind of like money is well, sometimes it's a big challenge, but like when I started this project, we didn't have any money. We still don't have too much money, so it's something that I should point out. We are spending now like substantial more amount of resources in kind of like what we had before, but like we started this project almost with nothing. I suppose you have to believe a bit in your idea, and I suppose kind of like passion and a bit of time and a bit of kind of like energy is what is going to take it a bit, to make it fly a bit. I suppose later on you can start to apply to all the kind of like, like awards or scholarships or your investment. If you need that kind of like support in terms of like money, if you need money. Having said that, it's really nice as well. If you are able to make something that like people perceive some value, you can start selling it and organic kind of like grow whatever idea you have. So I don't think money should be any kind of like constraint for that.
Just get started. I like it.
Can I just
go on, Safia.
You know, I mean, as a founder or an entrepreneur, or if you've just come up with an idea, you need to learn how to chase the money as well. So you need to find out who has money and find them, pitch to them your idea, get them on board, sell them your idea, and then ask. I mean, there's no harm in asking. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So don't see that as the biggest barrier or the obstacle, because I can definitely assure you none of us would be here if we genuinely just sat there challenged by the fact that we didn't have money in the bank to push our ideas through. You just have to go find someone who's going to be interested in getting behind you.
Yeah, to add to that regarding the money thing, one thing that we learned a bit working on a number of projects like this is that the business case for a new idea doesn't have to work only for one stakeholder or actor in the value chain. There's a lot of actors involved, and everybody needs to be happy about whatever you're doing, especially for disruptive new models. There will be people across the supply chain that need to be happy handling your product, that they need to be comfortable using your new solution. I'm thinking about, for example, the solution from Safia, for example. You will have a number of elements in your ecosystem, and everybody needs to, in a way, have a business case related to that, and that is to be positive. And sometimes it's a bit difficult to understand all the stakeholders, to make sure that from the very beginning, when you design the new solution, you have a system view and all the stakeholders are taken into account. Sometimes I've seen like some new concept, not just about the bamboo container, where we haven't considered, for example, that there's someone across the supply chain who doesn't like at all the solution. I'm talking about, for example, a secondary packaging we developed a couple of years ago. And the repacking operations couldn't handle the new packaging. This wasn't considered in the initial design, and this spoiled the entire project and created the cost. The cost started growing. And sometimes it's a bit tricky, but this is a system established many years ago, this ecosystem. And changing it, it's not easy with the circular economy model. So be careful taking into account of the stakeholders, yeah?
Okay, we've got just a couple of minutes left. So I've got a final question. This one's from me, actually, taking the chair's privileges, although I haven't actually chaired this one. Safia's done a fantastic job of that. Final question from me. We've been hearing so far at the Diff, it's coming up as a recurring theme about, well, I was in a session yesterday where we were talking about cutting through some of the kind of innovation cliches that we hear all the time. And on Monday, we had Tim Harford talking about a type of messy or complex form of innovation. Where do you get your inspiration to each of you to kind of think differently? Thinking outside the box has been a phrase that we've all heard too many times, but that seems to be what you've all done. How do you get the inspiration to do that? What's the starting point?
We went through that. Joe, I mean, paying attention. The wonderful Rodrigo. The starting point was in the lab. I don't think there's no cookie cutter. Sorry, I cut in, Michele. I was trying to make a joke on Joe, but how did we come up with this? It's just, I think we actually looked at the EMF when we first started 2 years ago. We looked at the EMF. We realized you were a bunch of really smart people, ex-McKinsey and all, and we looked at the models and then just let the brain do its thing. And then we started observing things that were not right. We were just observing things that weren't working and rethinking those things. And then you just let your mind go and you put together an entire business model behind it a couple of months later, and you put a team together, and then you just start attracting the right people at the right time. And you know when you're doing it, you know it's the right thing because it's moving fast. And that's how you know. And you know also when you're getting the right talent in and the right mentors and advisors in and interested, that's when you know, because that's validation. So yeah, my inspiration's EMF completely in terms of re-systems thinking. And then I just let my mind just do its thing. But yeah.
Anything else anyone wants to add?
For us, I think in PA consulting, I've personally noticed three things that happen when we come up with new ideas. So first of all, as we tend to be in a different environment from the bigger corporation or startup separate companies, we manage to be, let's say, outside the day-to-day work, and that helps us thinking differently because we see things from outside in a way, because we haven't seen the problem before. The second thing is actually there's a culture, and this is made by, I think, a few quite bright individuals that made that culture through the years, which is about really challenging the status quo all the time. Is actually asking why is it like that? And that's not, it sounds easy, but if you see it do many times, that becomes natural. It's part of the culture in a way. And the third thing is the cross-industry part. So bringing in at the table people who have worked on similar problems in other industries, in other contexts, really helps. Yeah, because
you're almost piecing together like a matrix of, oh, well, this could really apply in this industry, and oh, they're trying to solve the problem, but this model would look really great here. That's like kind of being behind the project.
Yeah, exactly. It happens very often. You can imagine, and it could be that is an industry that has done it before in a different context, or could be just a different application in a less mature as well. So it really just bringing a scientist for an engineering problem sometimes, or a designer. Sometimes we find a designer come out with very incredible solution for a machine, a manufacturing problem, which is just thinking outside the box because they're coming from a different angle. Anyway, cross-industry and cross-sector really helps. But
yeah, for us, we have a kind of like more than a methodology, probably an attitude towards kind of like trying to find a good idea. Sometimes we find the analogy of scoring a goal. So we find the analogy with the sports, and we find that there's three attitudes that are quite important. The first one is to be able to listen and to see, to kind of like observe what is out there in order to catch the first kind of like ball in your hands or in your foot. Then to be able to pass that ball, to kind of like share that idea that you have and kind of like bounce it, and you will go much farther and much faster. As Safia was saying, that if you are just kind of like running alone towards kind of like the net. And then the last thing is that you have to be able to shot without any kind of fear. So you don't have to be afraid of not scoring, because you will probably have to shot several times until you score the goal.
yeah.
So that's kind of like the three things: being able to listen, being able to share ideas, and being able of like not being afraid of shutting off, of like making mistakes.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's amazing advice for the people listening at home that might be have a circular economy idea that's brewing. Well, we're just about to run over, so we're going to have to draw this session to a close. But to Safia, to Rodrigo, and to Michele, thank you so much for talking to us about the future of food packaging here at the DIF.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
And thanks to everyone for watching along at home. We've been talking about the future of design. You've heard from three people who are designing that future. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and we'll see you next time at the Disruptive Innovation Festival. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.